Hello and welcome to the first episode of the How to Survive podcast. I'm Chris.
And I'm Joe.
So the How to Survive podcast is, I guess, just a podcast talking about horror films.
Yeah.
You may have noticed that a lot of people don't survive horror films. I'm sure we're not the only ones who watch them and think, well, I've got an idea how I would survive in that scenario.
Sure thing.
And so each week we'll just talk about a horror film in particular. We'll talk about what we think about the film generally, and then, throw some ideas out there about how we think we would survive.
Yeah, we watch a lot of films together and often retire to the pub afterwards and discuss the film. So we're basically bringing a microphone into that scenario.
Yeah. Yes.
For your enjoyment.
So neither of us are students of horror, not really. We're both fans, I'd say, casual fans.
Sure.
I certainly don't, necessarily spend all my time thinking about or seeking out horror films.
No, but I've seen enough of them to get a good feel for them, I think.
I think we've both seen enough horror films to consider ourselves authorities on the subject of how to survive them.
Right. And importantly, we're not experts on survival either.
No.
Bear Grylls and Ray Mears were asked to appear. They were unavailable. So we stepped in.
Yeah.
Each week we're going to cover one film. And we're going to review that film and say, how would you survive in that film?
Obviously, because we're talking about the films in their entirety, each week it is just going to be totally spoilers.
Yeah.
So if you haven't seen the film, you may not want to listen to the podcast until you have.
Exactly. And at the end of each podcast, we will tell you what next week's film is going to be, so you have no excuse.
Yeah.
In the interim, you can watch the film.
Exactly.
But first, we should go over the rules.
Yeah, so we sketched out a few general rules. Because in these discussions it's very easy for people to just go, oh, well, I just do X or Y, which may not necessarily fit in with the universe of the film, which I think is basically cheating.
Exactly.
So to try and get around that, we've sketched out a few rules. So these are the How to Survive podcast rules. Rule number 1, you must observe the established rules of the film, including setting, resources, capabilities of individuals.
So that means basically you can't build a time machine to go back to the start of the Hunger Games and prevent it from happening. And you can't kill Freddy Krueger with a lightsaber.
Yeah, because lightsaber's famously not a part of the Nightmare on Elm Street.
No, exactly. And it would break the laws of the film.
Yeah. So rule number 2, unless otherwise stated, you must assume the role of the character, including their motivations and abilities.
So I can't get out of the argument saying, I'm a 24-year-old man from the UK. I would have absolutely no business hanging out on an island with a bunch of Japanese schoolchildren.
Yeah.
Equally, you can't say, I would punch Jason Voorhees in the face so hard it would kill him. Because
I've decided that I have the strength of 1,000 men.
Yeah, exactly.
So rule number 3, you can't assume things we don't already know about the scenario or about the monster generally.
So you can't distract the alien in Alien with food just because you think he might be hungry. You don't know that from the film.
Yeah, there's nothing in the film that says, the alien is like hunting down all these people because he's hungry.
Exactly. And I think tying into that rule, it can only be things mentioned in that specific film. So if further in the canon they make up new rules or introduce new dimensions, that doesn't apply to this one film we're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. It's a different film, doesn't apply.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Rule number 4, unless specified, you cannot influence the fate or behaviour of any other characters.
For instance, I'd just tell John Connor to run up to Arnold and blow himself up with a bag of grenades, therefore killing Arnold, because that doesn't seem particularly fair on John.
No, John Connor wouldn't do that. So you can't force him to do that.
I meant Carl Reese. When I wrote these rules.
Rule number 5, you must try to survive.
Right. You can't just say, this is too stressful, I'm going to kill myself. And we don't want any heroes. You can't lead yourself and the zombie horde into the desert to save everyone else.
Exactly. Your primary motive, because it's called the How to Survive podcast,
right.
It's not how to write your name into history.
Right, yeah. If you end up dead at the end of the scenario, you didn't survive. Yeah, exactly.
Failed.
That is probably the most important rule of all.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first film we're going to be covering is Friday the 13th. It's, again, we're not horror students. I had sort of assumed that it was like a classic horror film. I'd not seen it until we watched it for the purposes of this podcast. It has this reputation, I think, of being like this classic horror film. I mean, it's really iconic, like Jason with the hockey mask.
Sure, yeah, that's what you all know and love.
If anyone goes Friday the 13th, who's the killer? You go
Jason with the hockey mask.
Yeah, exactly, and a big knife or whatever.
Machete.
Yeah, right. Little did I know.
Yeah.
Jason doesn't even appear in the film until what, like
50 seconds before the end. And then there is that one shot of him where it's like a silhouette in the lake, and he's like, "No, help!"
So yeah, Friday the 13th came out in 1980, directed by Sean S. Cunningham, and
directed. You say directed.
So, what did you think of the film?
I don't know. It wasn't unwatchable, but it wasn't very good.
So, let's all just, it may be a while since the person who's listening has seen Friday the 13th. So, just to recap,
right.
In the 1950s, an incident happens.
Right. So I can remember, I watched the film last night. I can say the exact phrasing.
Okay.
Well, not the exact phrasing, but the gist of the phrasing.
Yeah.
1956, a boy drowned at Camp Crystal Lake.
Yes.
The following year, 1957, 2 camp counsellors were murdered.
Yes.
Whilst making out.
Yeah.
In the 60s, 1962, I think, there was bad water.
Yeah.
And that's important.
Okay.
That comes up later.
That's crucial.
And then there were also some fires in the mid-60s.
That's right, yeah.
And that brings us up to the late 70s, early 80s, where the film is set.
Exactly. In the 1980s, the camp's bought by a man, Steve Christie.
Right, for $25,000.
Yeah.
Which
so
is considered
is Crystal Lake, is that where it gets his name?
Well, it could
Has
be.
he called it Camp Crystal Lake?
Well, has it been in the family for generations? Because, I mean, he's not an old man by any means. And he'd have to be at least, 50 for that to be viable.
Yeah. But it seems a coincidence. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah,
because the locals call it Camp Blood, don't they?
Yeah, exactly.
So maybe it is actually called Camp Blood.
The movie was originally going to be called Long Night at Camp Blood.
Makes sense. Makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Well, Friday the 13th is a good name as well.
It's 1980. Steve Christie reopens Camp Crystal Lake, invites a number of camp counsellors, future camp attendants, whatever you call them.
Yeah, they're counsellors, yeah.
Yeah. To renovate the camp.
Paint it, put up new beams, clear the barn, kill some snakes.
Okay. And we're introduced to this through Annie.
Who I thought was going to be the main character.
So did I.
Great screen presence.
Yeah, I wonder if that was intentional because she's dead within the first 15 minutes.
Yeah. There's lots of red herrings in the film.
Yeah.
Like that. They sort of lead you down the garden path and then kill you.
Yeah.
And then leave your body for someone else to find before they die.
Yeah, exactly. We'll get on to that. So the counsellors, apart from Annie, because she gets murdered on the way there, they're renovating the thing. Steve goes off because he's got something else to do, right? So they're all renovating. It gets late, so they start having a few beers and stuff, mucking around, all that sort of shit.
They quickly segment into a group who go outside and a group who play strip Monopoly.
Yeah, correct. So one by one, the counsellors get murdered. You never see who's doing it.
No,
which is important.
Each murder is carried out in a first-person perspective. The camera being the murderer. Yeah.
So one by one they get killed until there's one girl left, essentially, Alice.
And she's the only one who discovers that there is a murderer. The rest are kind of...
Well, let's talk about that. Well, I guess we'll run through the whole plot of the film.
Right.
So one girl left, Alice. She bumps into a kindly old woman.
Right.
Apropos of nothing.
Yep.
Who says, don't worry about it, it's all going to be fine. All right, let me just walk you back into this room, right? And then it turns out, lo and behold, that this kindly woman is Mrs. Voorhees, the mother of the drowned child.
Sure.
The reason the child drowned was because the counsellors were having sex at the time.
Right, and they should have been watching him while he was swimming.
Watching him. He drowned. She murdered the counsellors in 1950, whatever, set all the fires, presumably. And now that the camp's opening,
made the water bad.
Yeah. Well, I presume the water is his body, right?
Well, he could be, or indeed him.
Yeah. So, so she did all the bad stuff.
Right.
And then now she can't bring herself to let the camp open again, so she's murdered all the counsellors again.
Yeah. Right? And the owner.
Yeah.
And she will kill again.
Yeah. So there's a protracted fight between them. A number of skirmishes.
Yeah. Sprawls across the entire campsite.
Yeah. It gets to the beach where Alice gets the upper hand and cuts her head off with one clean blow.
Yeah.
From an axe.
It's machete.
Machete.
And then she reaches up to her wound, her open neck wound, and tries to sort of keep her head there, but it's gone.
Yeah.
In a classic cartoon style.
Exactly. Yeah.
I want to bring up something.
We should just say then Alice gets in a canoe and sails to the middle of the lake.
Right. Yeah.
For no reason.
Yeah, but she wants a nap.
Yeah.
That's the safest place. Apparently.
Right. I get her being exhausted. Right.
Yeah.
But surely you'd still have adrenaline pumping through your veins. You wouldn't just immediately be like, right, or like if you were safe, you'd be like, right, let's get the fuck out of here. Right. Rather than just going, let's just go to bed now in this boat.
Stress reaction.
Yeah.
Narcolepsy.
She wakes up the next morning in the middle of the lake on a canoe, right? There are two police officers waving at her from the shore, suddenly the decomposing body of the child Jason pulls her into the lake. She wakes up in hospital. They say, we found all the bodies, but not Jason's. And she says, he's still there.
And then she looks at the camera, more or less.
Yeah.
And
winks at the camera.
Yeah, and then it fades to the clear lake.
Yeah.
And the credits roll.
Yeah. So, all the ingredients, you'd say, of what is, I guess, the slasher horror genre?
Well, yeah, the typical motifs of what became the slasher genre. I think we have to apply a good amount of retrospective.
Yeah, so the film's 35 years old now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It was the first film of its kind to be allowed in cinemas.
Right.
Traditionally, these would be sort of video nasties, and they'd be seen in the home. Halloween was probably the first sort of blockbuster
slasher film.
Yeah, exactly. But this was the first one to be gory.
Probably should have watched Halloween, shouldn't we?
Yeah, we should.
Yeah.
But we didn't.
We watched Friday the 13th.
Yeah. So we're going to survive this podcast now.
Friday the 13th, right? There is a point upon which the story hinges.
Yeah. Which
is where I think, like, a main character after this point still behaves as though there's nothing wrong. And it's so ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
So one by one the camp counsellors have been disappearing, right? And, it's not like this has gone totally unnoticed. The remaining counsellors have been like, where's X person or whatever, right?
They're going to get drenched out there.
Yeah, exactly.
And they close the door.
Yeah, they're going to get drenched out there. Better leave them out there.
Yeah.
Right? But at one point, they go to try and find their friends, right? They pull back the sheets on a bed and there's a bloody axe in the bed.
It's been tucked in.
Yeah, right? Like... But one of the counsellors who's left, there's two of them left at this point, I believe, right? The guy goes, it's probably nothing, don't worry about it. Like, more or less just goes, I wouldn't worry about that. Yeah. That's fine.
Well, when in the face of death, all of these people seem to be very calm.
Yeah.
There's the scene where the first one, Annie, she gets her throat cut. And, she's just stood still while it happens. And then her reaction is to sort of, like, I'm opening and closing my mouth, but you can't see it. Like a guppy. Yeah. And then she falls over.
Yeah.
But there's no intensity.
No. So one of my problems with the film, right, is that I don't think I did know going in that Mrs. Voorhees was the killer.
Yeah.
Right. And so watching it with that in mind, you're obviously supposed to think that there's like a monster or like a big presence that's doing these murders.
I thought for a long time they were trying to lead us down the path that it was Ned Flanders, the Ned Flanders figure. What's his name?
Crazy Ralph.
No.
Steve Christie, the owner of the cat. Yeah.
Yeah, because he's there with his shirt off, like stroking all the girls' faces, and he goes into town.
True, yeah.
And then it's his Jeep. A facsimile of his Jeep that Annie gets into.
Yeah, it looks as though it is.
So we're led to believe that he's involved at least, I guess.
But it turns out to be Mrs. Voorhees, right?
Yeah.
So my issue with this is that Mrs. Voorhees, I don't want to estimate how old she is, right? No, but she is middle-aged at least. I'd say 50.
Well, her son was probably 11 when he died.
Right.
Being generous.
The youngest, yeah.
Yeah.
She must have been at least
32
like
or something.
32,
Yeah.
when Jason was killed, and then it's 20 years since.
So she's in her late 50s.
Yeah, probably.
Early 60s.
Yeah. And she murders one by one, single-handedly. I know she's got weaponry and everything.
And the element of surprise.
A group of athletic, like outgoing, outdoorsy type teenagers, right? And it's not just, I mean, I know she sneaks up on them a lot, right? But one of them, just throw a punch or something.
Yeah.
Like, Annie is backed up against a tree when she dies, right?
Lots
and
of places to run, by the way.
The way the camera looks, it does feel to me, at least, that she's looking up at someone, like in terror, right?
And you see the hand,
Mrs.
and
Voorhees,
it's a man's hand.
Mrs. Voorhees isn't 6'5",
no.
right? And she's not, 20 stone of muscle,
right?
You would think in the moments before death, instinctively, you would kick out, just at least do something, right?
Yeah, try and survive.
If it was a mild-mannered, innocent-looking, because that's the point, isn't it? That you don't expect it to be her when you first meet her, right?
Yeah.
An innocent-looking woman is the murderer, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's so unassuming.
Yeah,
but the big hang-up for me was the last death to be revealed is the death of Bill, who is the other camp counsellor.
Yeah, who's left the last two. Right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And
the one who doesn't think that the bloody axe in the bed.
Yeah. So Alice is she comes out of the generator room and she's like, "Where is Bill?" And the door closes behind her, and he's been pinned to the door with arrows from the archery range. And I'm wondering how one elderly woman was able to lift him.
Yeah.
And it's not a messy job.
Let's say if we're being generous,
precision.
a 12-stone man.
Yeah.
Right. And Mrs. Voorhees probably weighs 10 stone.
Right.
Right.
And he's been pinned up
him like
a ragdoll.
500 yards, lifts him with her like upper body strength, pins him to a door, presumably holds him with one hand, and then
drives an arrow through his skull into a door.
Yeah, with the strength of her hand alone.
Yeah. That's one of the problems I have with the film. One of them.
Yeah.
And I think the Mrs. Voorhees motif is going to come up a lot when we come to discuss how to survive.
Yeah, I have a feeling of that as well.
Before we get there, there is one thing I want to bring up. And it's another motif that it seems that the director of this film was obsessed with it. And it is the coming and going of vehicles.
Right.
And you may not have noticed this. Basically, every time a car is shown, it is always on the horizon and it drives all the way to the camera before any action begins.
Yeah.
And then if a car's leaving, it leaves from the camera and goes all the way to the horizon or round the bend.
Yeah.
It's just ridiculous.
Until it's escaped from view.
Yeah, exactly. So they can't afford to cut it or something.
Yeah.
But the best example I can think of this happening is the policeman who comes to visit. The first policeman on the motorbike. He says, "You dumb kids better stay out of trouble that way." The hayseed cop.
Yeah.
So he says his piece. He gets on his bike to leave, but because his bike's facing the lake, he has to ride it down to the lake, turn around really awkwardly in a tight space, then ride back past the camera, and then into the distance over the horizon.
All on camera.
Yeah. It's like the kids are all just staring at him.
They could have had a sound effect.
Yeah. He gets to the bike, says, "See you later." Yeah. I believe you. I don't think it's going to stay.
Yeah. No, it's a crucial bit of information, Joe.
Yeah.
That you see him leave.
There's a lot.
Playing devil's advocate, maybe it's like they're definitely alone now.
Yeah,
the policeman has definitely left.
You're making sure everyone's out of sight.
But then it would be a very grand assumption to, if you hadn't seen him leave, go, the policeman should save them, because I bet, rather than leaving as we assumed, he's actually been hiding in the bushes, waiting for them to be smoking a doobie.
Yeah, so he could jump out and...
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that was his big hang-up, wasn't it? That Kevin Bacon had been smoking weed.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't Kevin, it was the guy who was dressed as...
The Joker guy, yeah.
Yeah. First to die.
Yeah.
So other than the, frankly, bizarre things they chose to include, such as her going to get sugar out of the pantry... So there's vehicles coming and going.
There's one scene where she makes tea.
Yeah.
For like 5 unbroken minutes.
It's good. It's a good 10% of the film. But the thing is, because the camera is so close to her face in that scene, she's trying really hard not to look into the camera, and you can see her eyes. She's looking in every direction except at the camera, and it's just
itself like repetitive strain injury.
It gives me the feeling that the director somehow didn't know what he was doing. He was untested.
Well, credit to him, he made a film that is widely regarded.
Oh yeah, it is an absolute financial success and critical success. I suppose it's got the cult following. I have a question for you though.
Go on.
What did you think of the script?
It passed me by. There's no great quotable lines. I did laugh out loud at the scene where Mrs. Voorhees has a flashback to her son's drowning, but she does it by looking off into the middle distance, and I think just saying like, "Oh, Jason."
Yeah.
Jason.
No, she then starts channeling him.
Yeah.
Mommy, help me.
That's
I
right,
will, Jason. I will.
Yeah.
But I do have a choice piece of dialogue.
Go
on. Which I've written out in its entirety, and I will now deliver.
Yeah.
In the style of the character, it was Annie.
Yeah.
The first camper we see killed.
Mm-hmm.
She gets in the Land Rover.
Yeah, which is later revealed to be Mrs. Voorhees.
Right. But because Mrs. Voorhees delivers no lines, because it would reveal that it's Mrs. Voorhees.
Exactly.
She talks to herself, essentially.
Yeah.
So she gets in, and she says, "Hi, I'm going to Camp Crystal Lake." So then some time passes. Mm-hmm. There was, I think, at this point, a 4 or 5 minute scene of the car driving. She says,
"Guess I always wanted to work with children. I hate when people call them kids. Sounds like little goats. But when you've had a dream as long as I have, you'll do anything."
Now, Chris,
it was a perfectly normal conversation to have with a presumably silent stranger.
I don't know whether it's the goats line or the dream line.
It's very like overwritten.
Robot.
Yeah, it's really like it is a little bit like hammering home like, I'm just a little girl with a dream.
Yeah. It literally says that. When you've had a dream as long as I have, you'll do anything. You'll do anything.
Yeah.
Except, apparently, try and run.
Yeah.
Gives up on that.
Yeah.
Try and live. Try to survive.
I wish in the moments before her death she just shouted, "My dream is over!"
Yeah. Yeah. The only thing I wanted in this life was to stop people calling children kids.
I think we better stop. Please?
So on that note, we come to the flagship part of the show.
Sure.
I guess, which is where we discuss how we would survive, both in the roles of the characters, a few of the different characters, and also if we ourselves
found ourselves staying at Camp Crystal Lake, or on the Nostromo, or whatever film happens to be the case that week.
Exactly. So, should we start with the first people to die?
Right, yeah. So, I think we're going to do the first people to die in the film. What could they have done differently?
Yeah.
Then the main character.
Yeah.
If they survived, could you have improved on it? And if they died, how could they have survived?
Yeah.
And then if you found yourself in that scenario, what would you do to survive? And as a part of that, we've opened up the call lines. We've opened up the email, the tweets, the FBs.
Yeah. All of the means of correspondence.
Exactly. And we've encouraged people to tell us how they'd survive in Friday the 13th, so we'll be reading those out.
Yeah.
And of course, if you want to get in touch, that email address again is howtosurviveshow@gmail.com.
Exactly. So the first people to die in the film, the two counsellors,
yes,
who are getting off with each other in the barn.
Yeah, they're not really having sex; they're just sort of laying on top of each other.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it?
Yeah,
yeah.
Because they've been there presumably a little while. But they haven't begun any.
There's a weird
part of the Act of Congress.
Sex equals punishment thing in the film, isn't there? The people who were supposed to be watching Jason originally weren't because they were off having sex.
Right. Yeah.
Right. The first people who die also having sex. Right.
Yeah.
So are we encouraged to think that that's like a link?
That counsellors having sex causes.
Mrs. Voorhees to want to kill them.
Yeah.
Because it seems like they set that up.
Mrs. Voorhees go mad.
They set that up and then just don't actually
do it. It ties in with that whole mythology of teenagers go out into the woods or into the lovers who get caught in the act and killed.
It ends badly.
Yeah, exactly. The question is who survived to tell the story.
Yeah.
But
the first two victims, right?
Yeah.
They're having sex. they hear a creaking floorboard,
Yeah.
or whatever. They turn around and they are confronted by Mrs. Voorhees.
Yeah.
We later find out it must have been. Right?
Yeah, right, yeah.
So, because this is the thing, right? There's no suggestion that she's like somehow taking on like a supernatural like embodiment of Jason as we see later on in the films, is there? Like, there's no sense of that. It's literally an old, well, actually at this point she's in her 30s, right? I guess.
Well, yeah,
So
mid-30s,
so peak of physical ability, right? They turn around, they see her, and they're like, "Oh God,
it's not what it looks like."
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it is exactly what it looks like.
yeah, and she knows that as well.
Yeah,
Voorhees knows.
She's had sex, she's had a child, so you can't pull the wool over her eyes.
Yeah, she knows the signs.
She knows sex when she sees it.
And as we all know, sex is two people still fully clothed, lying
laying
down,
on top of each other,
lying prone in the loft of a barn.
Yep.
So you turn round, you see Mrs. Voorhees advancing towards you. What's your behaviour in this situation? Because all he does is basically just go, it was nothing, I promise. Right?
Yeah, it's not how it looks.
So she's got a machete.
As I recall, he gets stabbed in the chest.
Yeah, and then
then you don't actually see the other woman die.
No, but she gets chased around, right?
Yeah.
There's not really a lot of scope, let's be honest, for survival in this situation, other than
just punch the woman in the face. do anything. I've made a note here of how I'd survive if I was them. The guy was caught by surprise.
Yeah.
And I think went down valiantly. Whereas the girl, she didn't really have an excuse. She did a few lunges, and by lunges I mean the exercise of trying to get your knee as low as possible.
Well, she does the classic thing. This is great.
Yeah.
This is great tactics here of putting something between her and the killer.
Right.
Right. And doing the whole. Well, if you're going around this way, I'll go around the other way.
The problem is it was a cardboard box. Yeah. What was it?
I don't know. It's like a table or something.
Right. Yeah. But she didn't make a good run at either direction.
No.
She just sort of did. Where am I going? Where am I going? And then you don't see her die, but I think it's assumed that she. Yeah. There were promotional photos released showing her with a machete to the face. And although that's not shown on screen, I think we can assume that is what happened, based on that.
There you go.
So, how would you survive? I've said I'd make any effort.
Just do anything. Like, that's the thing. In a lot, I feel like part of the reason this wasn't necessarily the best film to start off with is because most of these people are either caught by surprise or essentially make no effort to survive.
Yeah, because they see an old lady, and that makes sense in a sense. Because Christie, Ned Flanders, he would know her.
Yeah, but he does say, "Oh, what are you? Yeah, what are you doing?
What are you doing out here at night?
Yeah,
it's raining.
What are you doing out here at night?" But he bought the camp, right?
Yeah, he owns.
So why does he know who she is?
She says to Alice, something like, "I've known the Christies for years. I'm a good friend of theirs."
Right.
Something like that.
But then why would the Christies buy the camp?
I don't know. Maybe this will.
Like,
I mean, it's a good plot of land. I'll be honest with you. I see. Sell it for houses. Like, it's such a big area.
Yeah. Lake as well.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, mate. There's a nice resort there.
Yeah.
But I mean, it only cost him $25,000. Even adjusting for inflation, I'd call that pretty good still for a plot of land like that. But we're digressing. The question is.
So basically, I think we both came to the same conclusion, which was, had the two individuals at the start, let's give the guy, right, a pass. Right. The girl, if she'd made even like a token effort to try and survive, she might have done.
Yeah, exactly. She basically stands still and receives a machete.
And the problem with this whole film, right, is that the whole film feels like it was predicated on the killer being a really imposing figure.
Yeah.
And that's why they're like so terrified.
Yeah.
I mean, they can't even, they're stuck.
That does make sense with the later Friday the 13th when it's 6'7"
right?
Jason.
Yeah. But it doesn't make any sense when it's the 5'5", 60-year-old Mrs. Wilson. Moving on from that then, I want to bring up, I mentioned it earlier, the axe in the bed. From that point onwards, I feel that's like a good juncture to talk about how you behave differently from that point onwards, right? Because putting myself in that position, right? I'm in a camp, my friends have disappeared, right? I go to investigate our sleeping quarters. There's a bloody axe in the bed, right?
And they're missing.
And they're missing, right?
Yeah.
And they still retain a level of calm from that point onwards.
Yeah.
Whereas I would be like, axe in the bed, right? Straight away on the phone, like definitely, right? I know they cut the phone line, right?
Yeah, but they don't arrive at that until much later.
Yeah, exactly, right? Straight on the phone, right? Because it might be overly cautious. You might get the police down, and it's just a prank, right?
Yeah.
But you're going to win.
That's one way you can stay alive.
Exactly, right? Yeah. So my second point: just get out.
Yeah.
Just get out of the camp.
Leave.
Right? I know it's raining. I know you're in the middle of woodland, right? There is a road, right? Just leave. Right?
I do have a certain question about this.
Go on.
We see Mrs. Voorhees track, for want of a better word, Annie, the girl, the hitchhiker, through the underbrush.
Yeah.
But does that make her a tracker? She's more following her. I mean, at night, would you be able to just walk through the trees and be fine?
Because again, when it's revealed that there's no supernatural element to her at all, is she actually cut out to do any of this?
Exactly. All I'm saying is take off at a sprint, and she's not going to catch you.
No.
She
hasn't athletic.
Yeah. She hasn't got the stamina or the speed or the strength to compete in the woods. And for that reason, every single person there is an idiot. So coming back to your point about the axe again, I think that's completely indicative of just the stupidity of the people there.
Yeah.
We always see these people just see clues and get dragged into bad situations. They'll hear a creak, and rather than going, that's probably a creak, I'm going to move on with my life.
Yeah. I better go investigate.
Yeah. I mean, having any sense of situation in the West, just go. I mean, Jason Bourne, right? I'll give you the example of Jason Bourne.
Yeah.
He wouldn't find himself in that. He'd have been on the trail of Mrs. Voorhees, if anything.
Yeah.
He'd have sniffed her out and said, right, this is the killer.
Yeah. I'll tell you what would have happened. He'd have been in the cabin playing Strip Monopoly.
Yeah.
Right? And someone would go, it's raining, and he'd sort of like look over, and then he'd walk to the door and look out, and he'd go, get your things.
Yeah.
And they go like, what? And he goes, they're dead.
Yeah, right. You can hear the rain's falling slightly differently, 45 yards away.
The air pressure has changed.
Yeah. There's that scene in the Bourne Identity where he says, I know that there's a gun in the glove compartment of that truck, and I can run for a half mile from my hamsters.
Yeah.
That's who you need, right?
Yeah.
That's the guy you need.
Yeah, in this
survive.
situation.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you say that, but equally, just anyone with common sense.
Yeah, true.
Like you were saying, just run away, right?
Well, don't go. I mean, I literally said don't go in there several times.
Yeah. But there's a bit after they found the axe in the bed.
I love how that's become a point. After they found the axe in the bed.
Imagine coming home and finding an axe in your bed covered in blood.
In place of someone who has gone missing.
Yeah.
Someone goes missing and in their bed is an axe. And I go,
right,
that's fine.
You were talking about the script earlier. I'm fairly certain, because I wrote this down at the time and I remember it happening. The guy, remember I said he remains too calm in the situation.
Matt Damon levels of calm.
He says, we'll be laughing about this tomorrow.
Don't worry. There's probably some stupid explanation for all this.
Like what?
We'll be laughing about this tomorrow. I promise.
There's a bloody axe in the bed. Covered in... We'll be laughing about this tomorrow. What scenario has he got in his head? What scenario has he got in his head that could be possibly happening? Where he'd go, oh, guys, do you remember... Guys, do you remember last night?
Hey, guys. Knock, knock. Who's there? That bloody axe I found last night.
Oh, my God. Yeah.
Why don't you stay here and try and get some sleep? I'll be right back.
Then they split up. It's just like a procession of like basic errors.
Bad decisions.
Yeah. The other main point in the film is when Mrs. Voorhees is revealed to be the killer, right? So she appears, she confronts Alice.
Who's the last surviving member of the
exactly, right.
group.
Yeah. because she's found the guy on the back of the door,
right?
And the woman who gets thrown through the window,
right, and
tied in rope. So Mrs. Voorhees picked the girl up above her head, and threw her with enough force to
break a window.
Yeah, break a window and land on the other side.
Yeah.
Right? So Mrs. Voorhees appears. Right now, they get into a prolonged fight, and Alice, like we were saying, finally someone puts up a fight. Right?
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know why she suddenly puts up a fight when all the rest of them don't.
Well, I think I did think about this. I think it genuinely is that she lost the element of surprise as soon as she revealed, I am Mrs. Voorhees, adjacent. Because the others, she kills Kevin Bacon through a bed with an arrow.
Yeah,
he can't have seen that coming. Yeah. But he could have probably, if she come up to him and said, okay, I challenge you to a duel.
What about Annie, who it's clearest to her ahead of time that there's something wrong because she runs away from her.
Yeah, but this is the girl who, to escape from a moving car, jumps out of it head first. And that's a genuine shot from the film. She jumps out of the car head first.
Yeah.
Then, I mean, she's probably concussed.
Yeah. That's true.
That's my defence of Annie.
Yeah, okay. I take your point.
Yeah.
Right, so Alice is then left. She's the last one. She's fighting Mrs. Voorhees. Right. There are several points at which I presume that the only reason she doesn't kill Mrs. Voorhees is because she's like a die-hard pacifist, and like the idea of murder is so abhorrent to her that even to save her own life, she won't even consider murdering someone.
Yeah, I think it could be she. I mean, if I was in that situation, I'll be honest with you, I don't think I would want to kill a human being.
Yeah.
And you could say that she was just trying to, let her off lightly.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she knocks her unconscious 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
For a good minute at a time.
Yeah.
So Mrs. Voorhees now has several concussions.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, if you can track it back and say she's been killing for years, maybe this has been happening for the last sort of 15 years.
Yeah.
And she's just mental because she's had so many concussions.
Maybe it could be the case. Although why is she? Oh, so you reckon it started as a conscious vengeance?
Right.
ploy?
Yeah. She wanted to murder people who were shirking in the name of sex.
Yeah.
Which is fair enough. I mean, I can at least see the logic behind that.
Yeah.
But after the first wave, the first generation of counsellors have been killed.
Yeah.
I think it has to be brain damage.
Eventually, she does kill her, right?
Yeah.
So
one clean swoop of it.
So she does that. That's fine, right? And we've already discussed why she get into the knee.
Yeah.
Right? So we go back to the axe moment.
Yeah.
The axe. The axe
o'clock.
Turning point, right? Put yourself in their shoes. What is your survival plan from that point onwards? Go.
Well, keep the axe. Yeah. Just hold on to it. You might need that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's part one. I think just be more efficient. When the chase is happening, after she's confronted with Mrs. Voorhees, I mean, I'm giving Bill, the guy, I'm giving him up for dead because he was an idiot.
Yeah.
So Alice, when she's fighting Mrs. Voorhees, she runs from building to building, to building to building, back to the first building.
Yeah, hides in the cupboard.
Yeah. My only rationale for that is that they filmed several fight scenes in different buildings and then had to cut it together in a logical way. That's the only way that what she does would make sense.
So you're saying you wouldn't run from building to building?
But
what's your plot?
I mean, there's none of those buildings had a benefit over any of the others.
Yeah. Well, they were away from Mrs. Voorhees. True.
Yeah. But okay, how about this? She finds herself in the boat shed with a shotgun and she's trying to find pallets.
Yeah.
And doesn't.
Yeah.
But there's plenty of tools I can see.
Yeah.
Hammers, saws, bits of wood, the element of surprise. You could hide anywhere in there. There's a ladder. You could
climb on out of reach.
You could do the Three Stooges thing of putting it around your head and spinning around. There's a lot of ways to keep Mrs. Voorhees from getting to you.
Yeah.
That she seems to disregard in favour of running back to the.
So what's your plot for survival?
Get a weapon and use it. Really, that's. Yeah. Just do anything you can to fight her.
Yeah.
She's an old lady.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
Okay.
What do you think of that?
She was. I think that's fair enough. Yeah. I guess we'll start from when you realise Mrs. Voorhees is Mrs. Voorhees, right? Because the element of surprise is gone.
Yeah.
And so that at that point, survival instinct kicks in.
Yeah.
Right? How do I get away from this
Mrs. Voorhees, who has been in camp all night killing people, arrives in a car.
Yeah. Dry.
Yeah. in a
rainstorm.
Yeah.
So Mrs. Voorhees appears, and I realise what she is, right? Just kill her immediately.
Yeah.
Right.
She's killed several people.
Yeah.
And she's going to do.
I'm not a particularly athletic man.
I think you're being hard on yourself.
But I feel like, and I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Joe. Right? I think that I could outfight a 60-year-old woman.
Yeah, I dare say.
Who's probably at least like 8 inches shorter than me.
If nothing else, you've got reach. You've got the reach.
Yeah, right. She's got a knife at this point, a small knife, right? Yeah. I'm in a kitchen. I'll be looking for frying pans. Yeah. I'll be looking for anything, right?
Yeah.
Just
baseball bats.
Just smash her head in, right? The moment that you know who she is, right? There's moments when Miss Voorhees is lying unconscious on the ground, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just smash her head in.
Yeah,
there's not one jury in the United States who would convict anyone of killing a mass murderer, right? Serial killer who's been going for 30 years in self-defense, right? To prevent your own death, right?
At her hand, where she's killed already that night.
Exactly, right?
She means to kill her.
She's undefended.
Yeah.
There's no way that she could when she's unconscious on the floor, right? I'm going to be above her with a saucepan. Like, I know she's an old lady, right? She probably does a lot good for the community. She used to be a camp counsellor, right? Apart from this one incident in her life, she might have had like a really charitable, loving life.
Several
she might have another family. I mean,
she went down the camp.
It's not established.
No,
right?
There's no.
Right?
We can't assume. We can't. Rule 3. We can't assume.
Yeah, but I would have no issue with repeatedly smashing her head in with a frying pan. Right?
I guess what you're saying is your hang up with what Alice did is not killing her sooner.
Yeah,
and
not killing her when you have the chance.
Yeah.
Like, why allow yourself to get into the scenario of having multiple...
Even if you're not going to kill her, just tie her up.
Yeah, just fucking lock her in the cupboard. I don't know.
Yeah.
Right? She arrives in a Jeep, right?
Yeah.
Just drive off.
Yeah, that's true, because her Jeep wasn't...
outside the building
the others had been damaged, but hers
Mrs. Voorhees is unconscious on the floor, right? You're in the building, outside is a Jeep.
No, she goes to the Jeep, but her friend is dead in it, and she therefore doesn't get in it.
Get over it, mate.
Yeah.
Come on, like...
You've seen a fair few dead bodies.
Yeah, plethora of dead bodies, right,
yeah,
up until this point. You've already seen a man impaled to the back of a door. I mean...
What's one more dead body?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You've peaked in terms of...
Yeah.
Grotesquerie, right? Just drive off in a Jeep. And that is how I would survive Friday the 13th. Kill the old lady and drive off.
I agree.
Yeah.
I'm checking the rules, and I don't think you've broken any there.
No.
You can kill her because she's an old lady.
Yeah.
And she's not supernatural.
Yeah.
You consider it conscionable to kill her? That's fine.
I think it's fair.
Yeah. And
I'm not, as a general rule, in favour of killing elderly women.
No.
In this scenario, I think it's fine.
Yes. Okay. Most elderly women don't kill. This one do.
Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. And it does happen anyway, so you're just speeding up the inevitable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's no reason why she delays it. Doesn't make any sense.
There is one other point that I want to bring up. And that is, we said the first person to die, you have to consider how they'd survive.
Yeah.
But actually, chronologically speaking, the first person to die is Jason.
Yeah.
So if you were Jason, how would you survive?
That's a tricky one, you see. I mean, he's 11 years old, we said earlier?
Yeah, 11 to 13.
An unspecified young age.
Yeah. He didn't look a well man, though. He looked deformed before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't really get a good look, do you?
No, that's the thing. He's bald.
Is he?
Yeah, he's...
Because you see him going...
When he's, help me! He's bald at that point, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Don't go swimming.
Yep, I'd written the same thing. Yeah, I mean, it's a Darwin Award waiting to happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Going out of your depth, you can't swim.
Yeah.
You obviously, you need
I mean, if I was Jason, even at 11 years old, I'd like to think that you would get a measure of the sorts of people who were your camp counsellors.
Yeah. You know who you can trust and you can't trust. But here's the rub. Is Jason dead?
I guess we'll cover that if we ever get to the later entries in the series.
Yep, Friday the 13th, Part 2. Friday the 13th.
You know, there's been
Part
11
3.
Friday the 13th films.
Yeah, including Freddy vs. Jason. So as a final say, so we have had people message in with how they'd survive Friday the 13th. Kerry emailed in, and he says, "Not a problem. I reckon I can take Mrs. Voorhees in a fight," which I think we've
covered.
We've established that.
It's fair. It's a fair point. I mean, I don't know anything about Kerry.
No.
But I assume that as long as he's in relatively rude health.
Yep. I mean, as long as he's not more frail than an old lady.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
That is the threshold.
Yeah, it's binary.
Yeah.
Are you more frail than an old lady? No, you can kill her.
Yeah.
Also, Callum emailed in, who says, "For a start, I'd arrange my own transport to get to my job."
That's a very good point. Yeah.
Could have avoided a lot of trouble.
Correct.
Also, I don't think I'd ever rush out in a storm at night to help a creepy child. Children don't come loose like that.
Yeah, that's a very good point. There's Help Me, the kid shouting.
I guess that was
kid's voice, but it was
Mrs. Voorhees.
Mrs. Voorhees channeling Jason.
Yeah.
Or just putting on a voice. Was that conscious, do you think?
On her part?
Yeah.
I think she's mental at that point.
So she's just unwittingly saying "help me," which is the last thing that Jason says.
Yeah.
Right. Rather than going, "If I say this, it will."
Well, I guess that's a bit of a red herring. Is it Mrs. Voorhees saying that, or is it the living Jason on the lake saying it, or a hallucination on the part of the victim?
We can't. I think
that would be assuming too much.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay. Rule 3.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we've covered some
sure
pretty good ground. So, like we said, get in touch if you feel that you have a better way of surviving Friday the 13th.
Mm-hmm.
Next week, It Follows.
Yeah, the 2015, I think.
Yeah.
The 2015
2014-15, depending on
last year.
Yeah.
It's been out. It follows the story of a woman who has sex and then is pursued. I won't ruin it for you.
Until next week.
When we will just destroy it.
We'll ruin the whole film for you. So if you would like to get in touch for any of that, then do email howtosurviveshow@gmail.com.
Sure. Or if you know us, you can tweet us, you can Facebook us, you can call me or Chris, and see you next week.
Anytime, day or night.
Bye.
Then he's still there.